Welcome back to the tasting room. This one's going to be a fun one. Usually I have to prep for these.
Yeah.
Like I want to research and I want to like see different interviews that my guests have done and get to know them a little bit more if I didn't already. But
Sure.
this fucker over here, I've known long enough where we're just going to have fun. And I'm glad you brought bread. I was hoping you would. So we'll dive into that.
Sure.
A little bit of bourbon that I've poured the neck off of. A few. It's actually been on a podcast before, but it's changed in flavor, so I wanted to try it again.
Very nice. Is that the one I grabbed from Deep Discount?
It is.
Nice.
It fit.
Nice.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So Trey Winkle in the house. Let's start with this. So we were just listening to our friend Jared Jordan's podcast.
Yeah.
And he called you out. I will insert it here so people know what I'm talking about, like right here.
You and I have a lot of mutual friends who are farmers and food producers, and I got to thinking about Trey Winkle, and he's probably going to hate this one. But are you familiar with natural wine?
I am.
Okay, so
but explain for people
for the audience. Essentially, natural wine is everything from the initial farming all the way through production. Involves no additives, no manipulation, no anything. So basically, it is the wine in its rawest form that goes through the functions of what you would have to do to actually call it wine. So to me, that's all bullshit.
Okay, so we had a chance to listen to a bit of it before we started. Do you have a retort to his view and standpoint on the natural wine craze and phenomenon?
I mean, yeah, to an extent. And I think a lot of people who deal with fermentation on a daily or a regular basis would say the same thing. It's that, one of my things that came up when like meeting winemakers, a lot of them will say things like, 90% of what happens on the vine is what happens in the bottle. And most people will kind of just attribute the fermentation process almost to secondary, because wine, with being as unique as it is, where most people farm it, then they process it, then they ferment it, and then it goes into the bottle, or a combination of that series. It's so much of the farming is really paramount, and I totally understand that. But the way that fermentation can change and heighten and just become a very specific time and place, I feel like it can elevate when people start to either change the dial just a little bit. So same thing with bread. I mean, you can ferment it in any crazy number of ways by adding more, natural yeast to it, less, let it ferment longer, let it ferment shorter. You can do a fast sourdough, long sourdough. These things contribute to lactic acid production, flavor, and a lot of other things. So when it comes to things like natural wines and capturing yeast from the air, which I think of whenever I think of natural wines, is minimal intervention. Some people are real sticklers about the sulfur and things like that, which I'm not really so big on or really care too much about. The addition of sulfur at bottling to help with any gassy notes that could possibly be produced. But I mean, as far as your world of wine, I feel like there's a lot of people that are very conventional and very, not necessarily very conservative, but they're a little bit more conservative because of all the education that they've had to build in the wine world, which is massive compared to, like, say, the beer world. There's however many styles of beer, and there's different places to brew it. But if you're not capturing your yeast naturally, you're not going to get, there are just a limited amount of yeast strains that I feel like brewers use, unless you're somebody like, a Jake Miller or a Chase Healy, or somebody who really kind of go outside the lines and really try to help the end result be something even more than the actual wort itself. So when it comes to wine, I feel like a lot of people put a lot of emphasis in what they've had to learn already, and so they stand a little bit more on the conventional side of it, whereas a wild or natural yeast or fermentation process, I think, can add things that are very untraditional and that are also very exciting. And that's not to say that all natural wine is great.
I was going to say, we have to admit some natural wine is shit.
Yep. And some people will they'll keep producing it because it's the most natural way of doing it. Whereas, when we're talking about bread production or things like that, The thing for me that I love about, I love that sound. The thing for me that I love about sourdough is its digestibility and the fact that it brings more nutrition to the person's body who gets to eat it. I can eat a sandwich made with sourdough and not feel like I would have if I ate the same thing. Thank you very much.
Cheers, and thank you for coming on.
Cheers. Thanks for having me. With your traditional white bread, I'm not licking the roof of my mouth to get it off of there because there's already.
Is that a thing with bad bread?
With
like Wonder white bread? Yeah.
Okay, and the reason why is because there's
I
lactic
remember,
acid in that.
dude, you just took me back to
Every
elementary
childhood
school.
sandwich you've ever had,
when you put the
trying
fake
to-
ass bologna
Yep.
and cheese and you took a bite and it was
Yep.
on the roof of your mouth.
And you're sitting there making that cat sound trying to
hadn't
get
thought,
it off.
Oh, I just used the finger.
Yeah.
But I hadn't thought of that situation or whatever
Yeah.
in decades.
Right, and try a piece of sourdough bread. You'll never have to do it because the lactic acid in there and all the flavor, all the acidity, it builds up and it makes it your mouth water. And so it'll never stick to the roof of your mouth. Also, there's different hydrations and other stuff like that.
I want to definitely get into your, I want to say newfound love of bread, but I don't know if that's an appropriate.
I mean, relatively new, I
Right.
guess. Yeah, probably 7, 8 years, I'd say.
Okay. So longer than I was thinking in my head,
Yeah.
but still relatively new in the grand scheme of things. You have to be flying high, though, because FarmBar is open and rolling.
Right.
And I'm going to ask for your official title because I always fuck it up with people, so we'll get there in just a second.
Sure.
But not only that, your Blues
Yeah.
looked good, I would say, or good enough to get a 1-0 win. So
They got the 3 points.
Right. They got
Chelsea
the
got the 3 points. And
Another
so-
Chelsea fan
Yes.
in the house. Go ahead. What is your official title right now with Lisa and with the FarmBar
Chef de Cuisine.
Okay.
Yeah. So basically, more or less that means that if Lisa were to step back and need to be at another restaurant, I could run the kitchen behind all, basically she trusts me to be able to do that. And I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah, it's a great gig. Is that just at one location or is it between Living Kitchen and FarmBar?
It's Living Kitchen and FarmBar.
Okay.
We're still in the midst of trying to figure out, Living Kitchen as far as having both places up and running in the fall, which just means hiring, creating more jobs is always a lot of fun. So that for me, finding like-minded people is kind of a big goal in that. Just because, I mean, you can't teach someone to have passion and you can't teach someone to be excited about the ingredients that we work with. But if they come in with that, you can teach them how to cook them and what to expect and things like that. So yeah, I think that's where Lisa and I see eye to eye a lot on people is specifically trying to get a certain type of person into the kitchen. And then from there, trying to teach them the way that we approach food waste, flavor. It's not all about, super big, rich, over the top things in large doses. If we ever do that, it's in, smaller portion sizes. So that way you get a hint of it and then it goes away. And the next one is as equally satisfying, but maybe a little bit more complex and things like that. And it's really just, in my opinion, and I know that this might sound a little arrogant, but I think it's cooking the right way because we get to be very sustainable in our approach. We get to source from some of the best people in the area. And, we use so many local farmers and we use the whole animal. So it's always making us find new ways of being creative.
I like to dig in and find people's why for what they're doing now. So your initial foray into the kitchen, love of being in the kitchen, did it come out of necessity because you needed a job and you just happened to find a job in the kitchen? Or was it growing up? Were you helping, mom cook dinner? Or like where did your initial, if you think back, your initial love of, or kind of that spark, when did it come and why did it come?
I think that even in like high school and whenever I was younger, food was always celebratory, and we always, which is also interesting because we basically ate the same thing for every birthday.
Which was what?
Spaghetti and meatballs.
Okay.
Which my grandma, I think, started and then taught my aunt how to make it, taught my mom how to make it. So anytime we had a birthday party, it was like, okay, well, we're going to have spaghetti and meatballs. Now we ventured out. My aunt will make Indian tacos or something like that. But like, food being a celebration. And then for me, it was the alchemy of it and then the hands-on of it. I love being able to use my hands. I love being able to take completely raw ingredients. That's why I'm a little obsessive about making everything from scratch. is see them in, I mean, you see flour in a powder form, and then somehow you get to that. Going from A to Z or A to B, whatever you might want to call it, is to me that practice, that precision, that alchemy is a lot of fun, and that's kind of what continues to drive me. But like actually getting in the kitchen, that was Trevor's fault.
Trevor's fault. Tak's been on the show.
Yeah.
So were you a science kid though? Was that like your favorite?
No,
So
I'm just
alchemy,
a terrible student.
right? So alchemy
Yeah.
only applied in the kitchen, not in the classroom.
And at my pace, you know, I'm
fair.
very much a student now, but having to learn in a way and in a facility that other people dictated constantly was always really hard for me to excel at. And then if I ever had questions, you know, certain teachers would just be like, you know, I'm done with your questions. Just, you know, go do whatever.
Sit in the corner and read. Or
It just became about football. And so that's the whole school. But, you know, whenever it came to the kitchen, you know, it was I think the first thing that I really loved making were like, you know, something as simple as a salad dressing. An emulsification, that process to me is it changes. It's a completely unique texture than most things can be. And it's you know, fat suspended in protein and all these things, you know, with vinegars and acidity. And it's this thing that you have to balance. And there's this understood ratio, but you can mess with it, and then there's just so many different ways that you can impart flavor. And so being able to learn techniques became my big thing. And I love technique driven food, being able to take an emulsion, for instance, and apply it in other different ways. Like it doesn't have to be just cold, it can be hot, and that can be used as a sauce for a steak, or you know, whatever it might be, even a vegetable course to, you know, add some fat to that and help bring out that bright vegetal quality and balance it.
Sure. What you said about the way you learn too, I mean, I think that's something we could all learn for no better use of a word, right? Because I think there's the societal norm of you got to go to school, you got to go to college, got to make these grades, got to do this. But for some people, it's not that you're dumb, or it's not that you don't want to learn. It's not that you can't learn.
Right.
It's that you are wired in a way, and not you, a universal you, but you're wired in a way in which the standard societal way of learning just doesn't click.
Right.
But that doesn't mean you can't learn. Because, I mean, like you said, you're always studying. I see all the cookbooks. I've bought half of them because you've recommended them.
Right.
And it's, you know, so I just think that's a quality, or just something that we could all, especially those of us with kids. I mean, I have dogs, doesn't apply. You have daughters, you live in a sea of estrogen.
Sure, I do.
So like, I mean, that's just a good thing for you to know as a parent, as you shepherd your kids as they're growing, you know?
Yeah. I mean, being able to cut some people some slack every once in a while versus you're in an institution and this is the way that you have to do things. Not everybody learns at the same pace, most certainly not by the same approach. So I'm like, for instance, this morning, I come downstairs and my daughter's in the kitchen and she is cooking breakfast. She's not supposed to be in the kitchen, and she's not supposed to be cooking breakfast.
Do you want to say daughter's names? Which daughter was this?
Oh, it's the oldest. It's
Okay.
Vivian.
Okay. Viv.
So
Hey, Vivian.
I had to get on to her, but I wanted to know what she was doing first, because I, as a creative person or a creative wannabe person, am bound by all the things that I know that have been done before, and she's not. So her ideas are like crazy. So she was cutting a banana with a serrated knife, and I have these ice cube trays that are rubber that I keep down in the freezer for whiskey. Well, this one was empty. She had it pulled out, and she had the honey next to her. She was going to freeze blocks of cut up banana pieces in a honey cube.
Kind of sounds delicious.
I can't see how it wouldn't be. I mean, imagine that melting on a pancake. But she had no inclination of how much time it would take.
Right.
She had no ceiling, so she was just creating. But I'm the parent, and so I had to get on to her because she could have cut her finger off, and we could have been in the emergency room.
And then you cut up the banana and put it in the honey in the ice cube tray?
No.
Oh, come on.
No.
You got to give her that satisfaction.
No, that's the wonderful life of being a parent, especially of 3 girls, and the oldest being so strong-willed, is I have to figure out how to keep her everything intact, but also understanding her place in the world, being able to show people the respect that they deserve, and also being able to be her true self, or as much as she can be without, getting into trouble.
Yeah. I feel like you and Christina do a good job at that.
Well, thank you. We try, but it's hard
Sure.
because all I wanted to do was figure out where her head was going next.
Let's be honest. What you really wanted to do is see how that frozen honey and banana tasted.
I mean, I know what it would have tasted like. It's just I wanted to see, because I knew she was going to do more, because she doesn't just stop. Like
Right.
it's crazy when she I have to use air quotes on all this stuff. When she makes a drink, she constantly gets citrus out of there, and she's cutting a line in the lemon or the lime, and she's putting it on the outside of the rim, or she's rimming a glass. We're not at home drinking margaritas and stuff like that. Like, where does she see this stuff? Well, we watch food shows all the time.
I was going to say, do you see a fire in her towards culinary things? I mean, it sounds like it if she's rimming glasses at home. Right?
Yeah, she is her mother's daughter. She is the ultimate hostess. Anytime anybody comes over, she has these stories that she has prepared. She has all these things that she wants to show them. She's got it all. And, she is so determined and is just ready at all times. But yeah, I mean, she's constantly, any building that she sees that she likes the look of, she's like, I want to put a restaurant in there. There's one right down the street. I want to put a restaurant in that building. I'm like, oh, okay. So, and then I start going into it where they're like, so, who's going to be the chef? And she's like, oh, I'm going to hire an amazing team of chefs. And I'm like, okay, great. Whereas, and then I keep going and keep playing. And I'm like, at the end to, give her a little jab, well, you have to pay all these people. How much are you going to pay them? I'll pay them $10. I'm like, oh my gosh. Okay. Well,
then you realize she's still a kid.
Right. Here's some reality. And, but no, I mean, yeah, she definitely comes by it naturally with us constantly talking about food, the way that we source food for our house and in our jobs. We always, ever since she was little, I had, like back whenever I was at FarmBar, I would have Wednesdays off. Well, Wednesdays was the farmer's market during the summertime.
Sure,
and so I would take her out there with me. And because every farmer had a story, or and she constantly got free stuff all the time. That's why all three of them will eat raw banana peppers to this day, is that one of the farmers there would give her banana peppers all the time. And so then she knew Penny Shelton and Chris Hutto and all those. So we would always go out there, and because the food had a story, she'd be more inclined to eat her vegetables. And so that was a win as a parent. It's like, oh, well, you remember the farmer we went to? Like, we went to Joe's farm.
I saw yesterday. The T-shirt, the tie-dyed T-shirt on your Instagram. Or maybe Christina's. I don't remember who.
She brought her own money. She insisted on buying a T-shirt. She bought it a size bigger because she wants to be able to grow into it and have it for a long time. Yeah, it's ridiculous. So. But no, they're great. They just, they need to listen. And
the other daughter's too young to tell if there's a certain fire for what you guys love. You being Christina and yourself. Yeah.
Colette is gonna. I feel like she's very artsy. She's not a big.
Which Christina is.
Yes.
So there's that.
Yeah. She's very artsy and very much like her mom, but she is more passive, and she's very, very, very lazy. Which is funny because her older sister and her younger sister are just always on, always. And so the youngest, the baby, she's 3. She's a lot like Vivian. So I don't know where it's going to go with that, but she is, she's kind of hard to figure out where her head's at a lot of times, but she's a very quippy child. Yeah. She's like, if you say so, and just random.
I love her attitude.
You know what I mean? And she's just bobbing around like a little Muppet. I never know where she's going to go next, but Vivian is she has focus and determination, and it sometimes can get her into trouble because she doesn't really, pay all that much attention.
Would you try to talk them out of the culinary world if you could, or do you subscribe to, if you want to do it, if it's your passion, I support you, go do it?
Yeah, I don't know.
Or a little bit of both.
Yeah.
Like, but maybe not do that.
Right. I mean, it's kind of, it's really hard to know how to kind of toe that line, because I don't really know if I would say don't do that. I definitely in the past have thought I would love to be able to teach her how to cook so she can cook for herself. Because when I hear of people who don't know how to boil water and things like that, I'm just like, how? Like, why? And then I think back to myself, 15 years ago, like I could boil water, but I didn't really know how to do much of anything else. But I mean, there's so much media surrounding food these days and stuff like that, to where it's really simple and it's easy to get inspired. I feel like in a lot of cases, and some people feel like they don't have a knack for it. But I also think that a lot of those folks will try it a couple times. If they fail, they won't do it anymore, because you have to do the dishes and you ruin dinner and all. There's a lot that goes into cooking as far as cleaning and all that stuff is concerned. So I don't know if I would ever tell her don't do it, but I definitely want her to learn the technical basics, so that way she can, go through life and cook herself a meal, cook a meal for, whomever else comes into her life and all that. So
you'll cross that bridge
right
before you know it.
Exactly.
Do you think the confidence that you gain in the kitchen and being able to cook for yourself and being able to see raw ingredients and visualize what you're going to turn them into, does that bleed over and equate into other parts of your life? Like,
Yes.
Did you see that in yourself?
Yes.
The confidence?
I don't know about the confidence. I think it's almost like, it's almost worse than that. It's almost like the judgment of other people.
That can't do it?
No, it's in life, in everyday situations. And I'll give
Let's dig into that. Yeah.
I'll give a very easy example. If you have never worked in the service industry before, you can tell, and it's very simple when you can tell, it's at the self-checkout line in the grocery store.
God, 100,000%.
That's it. It's like that is some litmus test for people who have been in the service industry versus people who haven't, because there is what's called a sense of urgency.
Yeah.
And move fast and get shit done. Like, there is a very simple approach to how you have to be in a restaurant setting. And I am lucky enough to be able to think as I cook in the situation.
What's the multitasking thing, right? Yeah.
But being able to, figure out the checkout at whatever grocery store you're in. I mean, it's very apparent the people who have and the people who haven't by just watching for a little while.
You were 100% accurate. 100. You mentioned tack earlier.
Yeah.
So let's jump back to that. Your foray into the kitchen as a professional was because of him. How?
So I was working at an airplane part machine shop in North Tulsa. A friend of mine was a lead there, and we were working in a room that was called the deburr room. And deburr basically means to take the burr off of metal parts with a handgun. Okay. So you take this gun that is it has a sanding pad on the end of it, and then you basically make those parts smooth. Then they go and they can actually be on airplanes, which is crazy to think that could happen based on the people that I worked with.
Yeah, that scares the hell out of me.
Right? It should. So I was out there.
As I cancel my flight.
Right. I was out there for, I think, about a year. And I had just met Trevor. I was living with a guy I grew up with and his older brother. And they were my roommates, but they were in the service industry. And so I met the whole, I'll call him the Chalkboard Garlic Rose crew. The Josh and Shannon Ozaris, the Jared Jordan, the Trevor Tack, and of course my wife as well, and lots of other folks through them who I'm now still very good friends with to this day. And I don't know what he saw in me as far as wanting to bring me on, but he said it started out as a night of doing dishes. And then that was just a fill-in gig, and then for one night. And then maybe it was a few weeks later. I can't remember the timeline, but he said, I think you'd really like it. You should come out and give it a try. It's like, okay.
And this was at where?
At Sochet Jazz Cafe. Yep. So this restaurant that opened across the street from the BOK, we opened the same year the BOK opened. So that's how I know how long I've been cooking. We opened, and it was pretty interesting. The amount of experience that was in that kitchen was a lot less than it should have been. But, we were able to put out a lot of really good food. It just never really took off the way that they had hoped, the ownership had hoped. And so they chalked that up to mismanagement. And then, actually, Tack and I both got let go on the same day.
Fun.
which was interesting.
Yeah.
I remember this day.
At least you had someone to commiserate with and go drink with.
Oh yeah,
So,
we went straight to Arnie's. But no,
Fair
I
enough,
had I was working on a fruit tart for dessert, and I was reading a cookbook on our little lunch break thing between lunch service and dinner service. And I think Jared was the one who told us, actually.
really?
Yeah.
That didn't strain the friendship at all, did it?
No, actually, no, it didn't. And because he kept apologizing. I'm sorry, I can't believe I have to do this, blah, blah, blah. And so, no, but it led to me working at Stonehorse, which
Jared
kind of
Jordan, you asshole.
right,
Okay.
which kind of changed. It changed a lot for me. That place was a well-oiled machine and had been for a long time, and a lot of people there had a lot of experience. And Trevor and I both started there, and talking me into basically coming in and working the pantry line, which is essentially, cold salads and cold appetizers and things like that. And the cast of characters that we got to work with, we got to work with some people that used to hop trains throughout the country.
No shit.
Yeah, it was interesting.
What a weird background that is.
Yeah. We had it's like,
What does that even mean? Like, you spent your days just jumping from train to train, box yards, or trying to get where?
Yeah.
Wherever it was going?
Wherever it was going, man. Yeah.
And then you just figured it out when you got there?
And they learned how to cook, because you can get a cook job in any city. That's how you can travel. I mean, if you want to do it.
If Grassfire goes south,
right,
John's going to become a train hopper.
There you go.
Is that still a thing? Are there still enough trains to be a train hopper?
I'm sure.
Right.
Yeah. But it was, you always meet all these wonderful folks who kind of, I believe they kind of help you perceive humanity a little bit better, because I mean, if you were from the outside just judging the book by its cover, you would never think, oh, I'm gonna go hang out with that person. I'm gonna feel as though they're my brother or sister in arms. But once you go through service together, you have
become a family.
Yeah, a very distinct bond. That whole pirate ship mentality.
Man, that's interesting. So then, how long did you and Tack stay in the same kitchen before you went your own ways? Was Chalkboard the last of that?
Well, we actually never worked at Chalkboard together. So we worked at Soche together, and that was, I'm pretty sure that was right at a year. And then I left there and started working at what was called Lola's at the Bowery, which is now where the tavern is.
Gotcha.
So that same space, we didn't have the extended kitchen that they have now. That was actually extra seating. When you see them from the street, the window, the chef's table.
Yes.
Yeah, we had this little galley kitchen, and that's where I met Nico Albert and Jacob Ide. And we all, for the most part, liked the same music and got along well. And so it was a good time, but I wanted something. I felt like I needed somebody with more experience to kind of learn from. I felt like I needed a different kind of mentorship, I felt like. And so that's when I started at Stonehorse.
Gotcha.
And with Trevor. Trevor ended up leaving there not too long after we both started. But, I mean, he had so much going on. He was a new father and all sorts of stuff. So I was able to kind of dig in there and lasted for a couple of years there. So, I mean, in all honesty, for as long as I've known Trevor, we've only worked together for about a year, and that in that time, he taught me how to, hold a knife. He taught me how to make any sauce, hollandaise, classic hollandaise, lobster fumet. I got to kill lobsters for the first time, which was so bizarre to me because of the way that you do it.
It's so aggressive.
It is. I mean, you are stabbing them in the back of the...
For those that don't know, that are watching and listening, describe how you kill a lobster.
Yeah, so they're stomach down on your board, and you take the tip of your knife and you place it like above their shoulder, like right in between the head shell and the body shell, and you cut straight down, and then you cut straight down that. So then you split their head in two, and that immediately dispatches them.
It's aggressive.
It is. It is. And so
it's very Dexter-ish.
It is. It really is. When that happened, like, when you...
Did you have a freak out moment the first time you saw him do it?
No. I was taken aback for sure, because I had never really...
Well, there's Winkle throwing up in the corner.
Yeah, exactly. No, that was a different day. No, but this one, it made me take a lot more care of what we did with them. And so, like, there's this really famous Thomas Keller story, how he talks about this farmer one day he ordered rabbits from, and they showed up and they were live rabbits. And so he had to not only dispatch them, but he also had to, take the fur off, everything. And so he said that since then, he has had so much more of an appreciation for the animals, the life they lead or they lived, and how they are handled afterwards. He said that if you've ever had to do that to a rabbit, you are much more likely to keep your focus on that rabbit while it's in the oven versus just being able to, it's overcooked, tossing it, starting a new one. So that fumet that we made with the shells was like impurities manifest in stocks by bubbles and scum, right? So you're constantly, in every French kitchen, you're taking a ladle or a shallow spoon and you're constantly skimming. I probably sat in front of that thing for 3.5 hours, just skimming. And it made a very lasting impression because of the work that went into it. Obviously, the super heavy metal way that we had to kill them. And,
heavy metal.
Right. And all those other things. So it kind of, I feel like that subconsciously sort of changed something in me in regards to how I've sourced since then when I've been in a position to make the orders myself.
Am I weird? Because it bothers me to my core to think of what I would do if I got a bunch of live rabbits and I had to kill them.
Right.
But I also love eating rabbit and meat. So like I'm not a bleeding heart PETA member.
Right.
I'm a carnivore. I love eating meat. But if I stop and think about if I had to do the murdering of the animals in order to eat them, it weirds me the fuck out.
Yeah.
Does that make me weird? Or is it like okay.
No, that's a very...
Because I can turn it off when I'm eating it and just enjoy it and not think about... Because
you're so far removed.
Right. In my mind, I'm so far removed, and it's a whole process that I'm not involved in, and maybe machines are doing it, not humans.
Exactly.
But then, like, if it was me, and I have all the respect in the world for the Joe Rogans of the world and whoever that basically hunt for their food. They go kill elk or they go kill bison or whatever, and then they have food for years, if not multiple years.
Keep your freezer full.
Yeah. But, just thinking about that, like, man, Thomas Keller's a gangster because that would...
I mean,
I got a box full of rabbits. If you got a box full of rabbits and Biv or Colette found them, you'd be up Schitt's Creek if you had to try to turn around and kill them.
Run me out on a rail for sure. Yeah, I don't know what they would do to me if they found out that I had killed 20 rabbits and then cooked them for people's dinner. I don't know what they would do. But yeah, I've only been a part of something like that once, and I will say that It was a friend of mine was raising pigs. We dispatched,
you've told me this story. Yeah,
scalded and harvested everything in the same day. It was a long day.
That's a long
because we did not have the right equipment for it at all.
Oh no, that makes it worse.
Not even close. But we got it done, and I will say that the next day I made I think it was pork chops was the first thing I cooked from that, and those were to this day the best pork chop I've ever had. So. I don't know, but my wife will actually back me up and say the same thing. So I don't know that it was necessarily the fact that I was a part of the whole situation, more so than it was how fresh it was, how the animals treated in its life, all those different things. Sure. Like we tried to go about it as best we could research.
Do you want to do a little more of the 1792, or do we want to have a little bread first?
I think why don't you pour and I'll cut.
Oh, that's perfect.
Cool.
Well, one of us needs to be talking while the other's doing things, so we can do this. So let's go into the bread deep dive right now. Okay. So your affinity for it, your passion for it, all of that. Here, as I'm asking the question, you can start to cut. Okay. How's that?
Sure.
But it's been interesting to watch from a friend's perspective your growing passion for bread and everything that comes with it. I'm curious when you kind of grew that affinity. Like, was there a moment that you remember you were like eating a piece of bread and you're like, oh, this is kind of shit. I bet I could make it better than this. And then turned around and tried to bake your first loaf, or how does one become obsessed with the process of making bread, and what about it drew you to it?
I want to say, as far as the baking process, it is very much the whole going back to that alchemy scenario of being able to take what looks like sludge or porridge or whatever your bread dough starts looking out like, and being able to make something that is texturally unique and, in my opinion, culturally significant. I think that bread and grains are the cornerstone of civilization. I mean, when you talk about beer or ale and bread, those things kept people alive for many, many years when water was not potable, all sorts of different things. So I think along with flavor and texture and appeal, just the actual appearance of it, honestly, I think, a very deeply roasted loaf of bread is very attractive. Mahogany and color, none of that bullshit blonde crap that just doesn't make any sense because you don't get anywhere near the flavor.
Right.
But I love that it can accompany just about anything. I mean, we were talking earlier with our staff about salad sandwiches, something as simple as taking Summer's Bounty, slicing it thin, dressing it, putting it in between 2 pieces of sourdough, and that's it.
That's interesting. Sounds delicious.
Oh, no, it's great. I mean, tomato, cucumber, zucchini, all those things stacked in layers, dressed with oil, a little bit of vinegar, salt and pepper, and then maybe a mayo for fat or butter even. It's killer. So good.
I will give you credit. Like what you just described just brought me back to before I sold my house. There was multiple nights, but one night in particular sticks out. I think you came over and we were drinking beer, probably. Imagine that. And I think you were hungry or I was hungry or something like that. And you said, what do you have in your fridge and pantry? And I was like, oh, nothing really. And you're like, I think that's kind of bullshit. And so you went through my refrigerator and my pantry, and you're like, dude, you could make this and this and this, this and this and this, if you just combine this and this with this and this. And then I go like to the restroom or to let the dogs out or wherever, and I come back and you're on the stove, on the burner, cooking something.
Was it meatballs?
Might have been.
Was that the meatball
It
night?
Was the meatball night. Yeah.
Yeah, that was actually really late. I remember that.
It was, yeah.
No, we're just pan basting some random meatballs. Yeah, I mean,
but what I was going to say is I appreciate, like, I feel like I've learned more in the kitchen from you, and not like, here's the recipe, but like the alchemy of it maybe, or the more of like, no, but if you have this and this, then you can combine it. And then if you add this, like what you're saying with adding the fat to the acid and to the salt, like, it's a whole thing.
Right.
But I learned more about that from you than I have anyone else. So thank you for that.
Man, well, I'm glad I could be of some service. I mean, honestly, the thing that I love about cooking, and at the end of the day, it's like it's either going to turn out great or it's not. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be the pillar of the culinary universe for it to be a delicious meal, or you just give it a shot. And I think a lot of people will do a lot better than they think they will if they just throw down all their inhibition of, oh, well, I've never cooked before, or I don't know what I'm doing, or any number of excuses. I mean, the same thing happened to me with sourdough for the longest time.
This is delicious.
Thanks. So that's some butter that we cultured at FarmBar. The cream that we get, oh man, the butterfat content is nuts. So I really love that butter. But yeah, it's just I feel like a lot of people just kind of lack the confidence in the kitchen in a lot of ways. Like, I'm still kind of finding mine, because for the longest time I haven't been in the kitchen. I was 2 years removed from, interestingly enough, the last time I was set to be the chef at FarmBar, the pandemic happened. And so I left because we went into furlough. And I had to find something because, like we've talked about, I have 3 young girls and a wife at home, and I needed something that was, one, that I wouldn't get sick while I was there, and because that at the time was just everybody was dying, so it was like the end of the world, right? But
and now it basically doesn't exist,
right? Except for I had it like a month ago.
Yeah, but no one talks about it.
Right?
But no one talks about it.
Right? Yeah, no, Christina and I got it for the very first time a month and a half ago, maybe. And that went through our house. But, So having to find a job that wasn't in the kitchen, that wasn't around people all the time, was definitely left my skills unpolished. And so getting back to it, I'm just now, since February is when I started back at FarmBar with Lisa, really getting my feet under me. I feel like I'm able to be a little bit more creative and not just worry about getting the job done, but actually like how best to do it. Because before, you do lose confidence that you can slowly gain, but so much of cooking professionally is in the eye of the beholder, and it's in the end result. You can taste as much as you want to, but taste is so subjective as well. Going back to the natural wine thing, people's taste are their taste, and some people just don't like it. They don't think that it deserves a place at the table. I think otherwise, but I also don't have all of that background knowledge when it comes to that whole natural wine thing. But yeah, I think a lot of it is just confidence in the kitchen and thinking about things as a balance. Bread is a balance. You're balancing so many different things, and it's 3 ingredients. Yeah. That's it.
So what went into this loaf?
So this loaf is 45.
And I didn't mean ingredients. I just meant processing.
Right.
Whatever, yeah.
So I'll throw out some percentages.
Yeah, please. Because I have a question about that.
Sure. And then I'll explain it pretty quickly. So basically, when you make sourdough bread, I use a scale, a gram scale. It's actually a postal scale. It's my favorite scale because the face, you can move it and do big bowls of batches or whatever. But so this is about 45% stone ground whole wheat and 84% hydration. And those percentages are based on the total weight of the flour that goes into it.
This is why it surprises me you weren't a science kid.
I'm not, but when it comes to technique and when it comes to being able to apply this, so this bread is what I make at home. This is actually the home recipe that I use quite often, and it's 20% of it is levain or sourdough, the pre-ferment, your starter. And then, a little bit of salt here and there, and you're pretty good. Obviously you need your salt, but you need to add it at certain stages in the bread, in the life of the loaf or the life of the dough, essentially.
How long did it take you to figure out those percentages? And if you weren't to make it at home in the environment in which those percentages give you this end product, would those percentages have to be adjusted?
No,
Okay.
Not those in particular. The percentages would be changed depending on the grains that we use. So because I'm using stone ground whole wheat, and they're both actually from Bob's Red Mill, which is a very trustable source of flour. So like for instance, at the restaurant, we use a King Arthur Special Patent, which is just a slightly higher protein content than an all-purpose flour, which basically means that it has a little bit more strength, more or less. It's less than a bread flour, but more than an all-purpose flour. So you can still bake like nice, delicious cakes with it, pastries, all that stuff. And then we use Cat's whole wheat. So this whole wheat is grown organically in Fairview, Oklahoma. By John's Farm. They've been growing organic whole wheat for a really long time. It's hard red winter wheat, usually speaking.
Wow, somebody didn't turn their phone on silent.
Man.
That's okay. Justin Thompson's the other day went off because someone in his favorites was texting him when he was on the show. So it's a running theme. You're
nice.
Good. You're good.
So she gets it from them, and then she has a mill. She's gone to Cat Cox is who I'm talking about.
Does a great job baking bread.
She is an amazing baker. She really was able to make her name at Living Kitchen and FarmBar before me. One of my consider a very good friend of mine. Still love buying that whole wheat from her. I started using it back whenever I had my own place.
Which we'll get into in a second.
Sure.
I'm going to ask you about that.
But so I know how it interacts with that flour specifically. So that's what we generally use as a base. But for instance, today, which is wildly different than the bread that we're having right now, is a porridge style bread. And so basically that is just a way of adding even more hydration and more flavor. And more, a little bit more fermentability, but also just being able to highlight another grain profile. So today's bread that I made for the first time was a purple rice porridge The purple rice is from Ralston Rice in Arkansas. They are a sustainable farm out there, with charred shishito peppers. So that's the porridge.
Come on.
And then we're going to serve it with that butter, but over the top of the butter, we put we take tomato skins after we process them, dehydrate them, and turn them into a powder. So it adds acidity there, but also a little bit of savoriness. So you're going to have purple rice, charred shishito in a form of a porridge.
That's like year 30-20 shit over there.
Well, the funny thing is like the porridge breads are by design, or by becoming more and more popular. That's a Kat Cox thing. I mean, she started that at Living Kitchen, and I know that granted, porridge breads are not her invention,
Right?
But she made them famous in Tulsa for sure.
So the shishitos are in the bread?
Oh yeah, they're charred in a pan first, and they're drained of the oil, and then they're chopped up, and they're added to the rice porridge, which, like I was saying before, is purple. So it kind of lends a color to the dough, which deepens it. It lends a new flavor to the dough. But the shishitos, the point behind them, for me, is going to be aromatic. So when you bake the bread and you heat it back up in the oven and you pull it out, you're going to be able to smell it from your plate. So like last week's bread was a buckwheat porridge with scallion from the farm. So luckily at FarmBar, we also have our own farm that does a lot of produce that we get to use, and it's awesome. It's very inspiring, and we try to figure out ways of utilizing them. And so we were doing all sorts of different things with the scallion top as far as garnishing or flavoring or whatever, but we needed to use the whites. And so you don't even see them in the bread, but you smell them the second the plate goes in front of you, because we serve the bread so hot. But yeah, so porridge style breads are new to me. Sourdough, like we said, I've been doing since the R-Bar days. I used to bake them in what we refer to as third pans. So the loaves were huge by cooks, Renee specifically. You know Renee?
Oh, Renee. How is Renee?
I haven't talked to him in a while.
You haven't talked to him in a while?
I need to send him a text. But he had to hate me because we baked the loaves that morning, and he had to cut them on the line. And when they're that big and you're cutting them to order and all this stuff, it's like the bread being fresh. If you don't have a knife like I have, it's really tough to cut fresh bread. Like this bread was baked just a couple hours ago.
It's delicious, man.
Well, thanks.
So let's talk about your venture where you owned and operated for the first time.
Yeah.
Down south, Levan. You ready for the most open-ended, broad question I've ever asked on a podcast? What did you take away from that?
Oh man,
what was your biggest lesson from that one, buddy?
Did you get that out of the rule book for questions
right.
for interviewers?
Right, yeah. It's interviewers for dummies.
Right, exactly.
Find it at Barnes and Noble everywhere.
I saw your For Dummies section.
That's
walking in. I mean, I was surprised that you had.
There's a lot of shit in there too.
I was surprised you had videography for dummies. I was like,
that.
Whoa.
Driving for dummies. I mean, there's fucking so many books out there.
Right.
Yeah.
Man, it was. That's exactly what it was, and it's something that I don't take for granted. Being able to open it with my wife and with our then friends. It didn't work out, but.
What do you equate, like, if you were to pinpoint why? Was it location? Was it newness of doing it for the first time and not having known a couple things? Was it a combination of all of it? Like,
sure.
What do you think the reason was, if you could say that?
I mean, a successful restaurant is such a random combination of things that have to happen and that have to work. I don't really. I'm the kind of person that likes to have a place blame, usually on myself, so that way I can just internalize it and get it over with, and just move on. But with that, I don't really know exactly what the downfall. I mean, eventually, and we were already on our way there, but eventually it was COVID.
Sure.
So when people ask at face value, I can say, we were a COVID casualty, unfortunately, closed down at that point, but I was not a part of it at that point. So I was already at Living Kitchen while the people that were working it with me were trying to keep it afloat.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, restaurants, successful restaurants, it's really hard to pinpoint what the what the successful formula is, or the formula for success. I really enjoyed our food. I really enjoyed our sourcing.
Food was spectacular.
Well, thank you. I thought that the ambiance was really neat because we could go from casual cafe during the daytime, and then you turn the lights down, and we could go to a really sexy dining room at night because of the lights in there,
The fireplace.
You know, the banquette was really neat, and the fact that you get to watch us cook was
That
really
was my
neat.
spot, the banquette.
Right.
Yeah.
So it was always something that I fought tooth and nail for a really long time, until it was time to basically back out. And I mean, this is something that I really enjoy talking to Lisa about Lisa Becklin, because she, as you know, talked about it in when she came on about her failure in Seattle.
Up in Seattle, yeah.
And it's, you know, I was talking to her as she was talking about opening FarmBar, and it took her that long. I had no idea she was that young when she was that successful either.
Right.
I was, I mean, you know,
That was one of the more
30s.
vulnerable episodes, and like her opening up, I'm so appreciative of, because
Yeah.
I learned things that obviously I had no clue of
Right.
either. It was like, wow, you were a baby.
Right. Can you imagine
baby.
being 24 and having a successful thing that's the only
I couldn't
thing
have a
you've ever
successful
wanted to do?
marriage at 24, let alone like
Most people can't.
open up a
I know.
award-winning restaurant
Right.
like that. I mean, come on.
Right. So I love being able to talk to her about it, because she has such a I feel like that's where we really kind of see each other's sides of the being in the business. Is we can talk about our failures, and then we can talk about our successes together, and we can talk about how that was the past and this is the future, this is the now. I mean, you know, failure makes you question everything about yourself. Like, what did I do wrong? Like what you were saying. You know, it's really hard to say. I would love to just be able to blame the location, or maybe it was we didn't offer enough different, you know, kinds of food, or our menu wasn't big enough, or our staff wasn't big enough. It just, you know, it's this weird, you know, as success is a weird combination of things, so is the failure of it.
Yeah.
And but I will say that, yeah, we learned so much from it, and I think the most important thing that we learned from it is that your partnership really, really is the most important aspect of it. Knowing where everybody's coming from, having open communication is also a really important part.
Isn't that funny? That's a through line to so many things.
Yeah.
Just communicate.
Yep, just say it.
Yeah.
Because I mean, if you don't say it, it's just going to fester and become a failed business.
I have a friend of mine that says, and he is a very, I don't know who to equate him to in our friend group, but he says it all the time. He's like, I'm a face stabber. I'm not a backstabber.
Yeah.
He's like, I'll tell you to your face. You might not like it.
Right.
And I might not like saying it.
Right.
But I'm going to stab you in the face. I'm not going to wait until you turn around and tell somebody else
of course.
what I was just about to tell you.
And I've lived by the, you know, I don't know, motto or whatever. I'll never say anything behind your back I wouldn't say to your face. But at the same time, when you're in a situation like that, a restaurant that is slowly failing, but you have good days, or you have even a good week, it's just this thing that keeps pulling the rug out from you, underneath you, and you keep running to the rug. It just keeps happening, because you see these successes. But when these successes last days, or a day, a week, and you don't know any better than to, well, reassess and ask yourself, are we putting all of our resources in the right places? Are we spread too thin? Is it capital? Is it time? Is it our hours? I mean, you question everything when you're not just successful day after day after day. But then you get those glimpses of a Tulsa World Review, for instance. I was talking to Lisa about this the other day. We had 2 separate Tulsa World Reviews, because we first opened up for brunch, and then we opened up with full dinner service. And thankfully, Scott Cherry and his wife, who's very kind to us, liked us, and we had 2 4.5-star reviews.
It's awesome.
Which I was like over the moon about. So happy. Well, when those reviews came out, we were busy for those 2 days. And I don't know why it's like that in Tulsa specifically, because, in bigger cities, they just have a population that can, like, it will funnel down or, flow down to where, oh, well, we're not going to go today. We're going to go next week. And I don't know what it is about that. Like Lisa was talking about Seattle and how if a review came out, they would be busy for weeks or months or whatever. And I told her, I was like, straight up, we were busy for
dude, sometimes decades.
Yeah. For those 2 days. And those weren't the only 2 busy days. I don't want to say that it was all just, us standing around, but those were our 2 busiest days that I remember having. And so yeah, it was a very big learning experience, like anyone who's ever failed will say. But I hope to someday, do it again. And I hope to someday do it again with my wife, if she will do it again with me.
Did that strain the relationship at all?
We've always had a really, really strong relationship.
Because I'd imagine, like, if you're both stressed out about the same thing, you're working together, you got to come home. Like, I could see that even in the strongest relationship at times being like, it's just you're going to butt heads about it, right?
I mean, for sure. But it was more, I think it was more communicative between the 2 of us than it was between us and our partners at certain points, because of how much we were putting into the work versus how much we felt we were able to just sit on the sidelines and watch things happen and then talk about them. We put way more emphasis on the day-to-day, being there, doing the work, getting the things done. How can we save money, while still staying true to what it was that we wanted to do? I didn't do my food cost for the first year that we were open. And I just I just didn't want to focus on that. I wanted to focus on the people that were there, making it a good place to work, and our guests' experience. And after I'd finally done it, I did it for like the last 3 months that we had worked, and it was shockingly low. And I say shockingly low because of the way that we sourced was so much local food. Everybody thinks that if you source locally, it's much more expensive, when in certain cases it can be, but the local market fluctuates much less than the grocery store does. But a lot of people don't notice it. Like, I mean, I know that you as a barbecue enthusiast have seen the beef prices.
I've stopped doing brisket.
Exactly. Like, well, why would you?
Right.
Why would you keep doing that when you like? Who is going to be able to afford a whole brisket?
Yeah, I'm not selling it, so it's...
Right. I can actually. You could probably go to a local purveyor or a local rancher and buy a brisket that is the same price right now. And whereas before it seemed so astronomical, an ask for, $6 a pound to $8.50 a pound. Now it's like just that's what research is getting. Yeah. So I feel like being able to talk to the person who I'm putting money in their pocket is a lot better for me than a big box anything.
I say that all the time. Like, I would rather pay my friends money than pay a stranger money. 100%. Across the board.
Yeah.
I don't care what it's for.
I would rather pay more.
Honestly.
Yeah.
Because you know who you're supporting. Right. You know what it's going towards.
Right.
I'm happy to hear that the experience didn't sour you on opening up your own spot.
No.
In the future.
Yeah. That's obviously down the road, but still, we've got a pretty good idea for something that's fun that will be, we refer to it as our retirement or whatever, but it's our retirement while still working.
No details you can...
No.
Okay.
No.
All right. I'll leave it. When we stop recording, I'll ask you again.
Right. That's for, I think for down the road. But,
sure.
With that being said, we're still daydreaming. We're still overthinking things. We're still talking about, decor well before, we need to. Sure. But I mean, that's just anybody who has an entrepreneurial spirit, I feel like. So I'm glad that she's willing to do it with me again. Yeah. And hopefully it will be a smashing success and exactly what Tulsa wants.
I've told you about the restaurant I want to open, haven't I?
No.
I swear over whiskey or beer at some point I've told you about this.
I don't think so.
When I start to tell you, I think you're going to remember it.
Okay.
I don't know the spot yet. I was going to say Kendall Whittier, but I'm not sure where. I'm not even sure if Tulsa's the right place. But I want to open up a pastor taco bar, basically, that serves 2 beers in cans. And has the rotating thing of pastor. What's that called?
Trompo.
Yep. and it's open from midnight to 4 a.m. And it's near a bunch of bars.
Yeah.
And that's it. No seating inside, all patio seating, so that when I close down, you guys can stay there and eat and drink whatever, beers in cans, no dishes.
I've only seen
paper plates.
one other place like that, maybe in Tulsa for sure. But
so I'm thinking, man, like that's what's better than drunk tacos,
nothing.
right? And then Pastor have a couple different salsas that we make fresh each day. I say we because you're involved in this, by the way, just so you know.
I'll consult, but I'm expensive, just so you know.
Right. And so that's my idea for a restaurant. All right, 2 bigger questions, and I'll let you go because we could just talk for hours. You mentioned populations and how that kind of can affect, I guess, the number of people. Obviously, it has a tangible effect on how many people come out to eat, all that different stuff. To me, it also has a tangible effect just because of the sheer numbers of if you open up a certain style of restaurant, there are more people that are going to be drawn to that style if the pool you're drawing from is bigger, right? The only thing that worries, and it's not worries me from a sense of anything about the quality of food, anything like that, but a restaurant that does strictly tasting menu in a city like Tulsa that doesn't have a huge population size, is there a concern in your mind at all that at some point that runs its course and people are like, I don't want to go have another however many course dinner. I just want to go have a burger. And I know you have burger night, so that might be a bad example. But the question still stands, right? Like, does that sit back there in your mind at all? Does it sit in Lisa's mind at all? Do you know?
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, you know, with anybody who owns a business, you always wonder, is it always going to be a sustainable thing for us to do? Because of the way that we cook, and again, because I think it's the right way, we are given so many outlets to emphasize how it works well for us. But equally and ideally more so works well for the guest. So as far as we are not a butts and seats operation, you know, there's a certain number of people that we would like to see every night. And at that certain number, we are profitable, which is great to know. And it's so important.
Regardless of the menu?
Okay. It's very important to know. And, you know, with the menu, we have only recently started to expand into the seafood world. And the reason for that is, I don't know if it was necessarily me talking about it openly, but I think it was Kat and myself before Kat left for New York, was talking to Lisa about her story. I mean, she's from Seattle. She grew up around seafood her entire life. She cooks seafood very, very well. What do we do? What is at our core? And that is sustainable sourcing and trying to source from the best people that we can and trying to support those people who are doing the right thing. And so through that, we have began to work with Bodine locally and then probably a couple of places as well for some more specialty items. But we want to find those same types of farmers. You know, I'll take just off the top of my head, Resilient Growers in right outside of Tulsa right now. They do an incredible job with produce. Joe Tierney, obviously, in Bixby, does an incredible job with produce. And so we want to buy from them as much as possible and support them as best we can, because the more money that we are able to pay them, the better they're able to do their job, and the more time they have to do it, the more time they have to think about how to get better at doing it. It's all that, you know, we call it capital, but I mean, it's resources, 100%. So we're looking for those people now after all this time, because we and when I say we, I mean, well, I guess kind of it's my mission now is to kind of tell Lisa's story through seafood at the restaurant. So the first thing we brought on, we've had, you know, shrimp and mussels here for whatever, but, you know, shellfish is a very great thing to have, period, just for the environment, for its impact on the aquaculture, you know, in its whole. So bringing on mussels and doing a dish that features them, and then also, you know, seasonally, you know, well-sourced halibut and sustainable things like that is important. So when it comes to the diner's experience. That's what we're about. We're about the experience.
That's why I think what I asked, the answer is yes, it will survive.
Yeah. I mean,
because of that.
Long story short, for sure.
Right.
Because not only are we, and we're also keen on the fact that being able to sit down for 11 courses for 2 hours plus is a commitment. It's a commitment monetarily, and it's a commitment with your time.
But I think that's your niche, right? I think it's like if I'm, and not to interrupt you, but if I'm going to spend money on a special occasion dinner, I would much rather spend it in a place that gives me the quality of the food that you're talking about, that gives me a menu that if I come back in 2 months is not going to be the same. Right? It's going to be seasonal. It's going to be picked from farms and outlets or whatever that I know are top quality. And if the price is roughly what I would spend to go to a chain and eat a nice dinner, and I'm not going to call out any local restaurants, but I would rather go sit and experience chefs like yourself and Lisa, who, I mean, Ilsime and her pasta and then her seafood. I mean, what can't she cook, right?
Yeah.
And I would rather go experience that, support that, than I would something else.
Yeah.
And so to me, like it's the whole, I think your niche is that special, because it's, I mean, I can't do that every week.
Right.
You know?
No, I mean, and that's the thing, is we're not asking people to.
Exactly.
And I think that for us, that creates a little bit more staying power, because we're not asking people to come see us every single week or counting on it. So because our numbers are what they are, we're able to really dial in each dish, and each week ideally make it even better. So I think that this model in particular, which we will also be enhancing a little bit more in the not too distant future, is completely sustainable. And I think the main reasons why is because of our dedication to the way that we source and the way that we cook and the way that we offer the experience to the diner. I mean, Lisa says it all the time. We're in the business of experiences. We're not here to just sell a meal. And I love that. Yeah, I mean, I do too. And so that's why it's very easy to want to work with someone like that, who is always considering the person sitting in the chair versus just, oh, well, what do I want to cook? You like, chefs get on that kick a lot, and they have to kind of ground themselves in certain cases, and some people don't. Some people just want to be the avant-garde person, and then just assume that at some point people are going to recognize their genius, right? But I don't think that we suffer from that a lot in Tulsa. I think that we almost suffer from modesty, if I'm being honest.
Not almost.
I feel like myself included, I've always wanted kind of the food to talk and versus myself, and I never wanted to sell myself as I'm this chef, I'm this whatever. But with that being said, you can't really afford to not talk a big game anymore,
right? Because
so many people nowadays who aren't professional cooks talk about all the things that they're doing, and then you don't. It's like, well, what are you doing? Exactly. Are you doing anything if you're not really talking about it? So, I mean, I think I am. If I'm working
I'm pretty sure I
40 to 50 hours a week doing this, that, and the other, or researching, or, the 180 cookbooks that I have, or whatever, that are constantly on our dinner table at the end of the night. It's one of those things that I feel like we are changing as, as far as societal norms and, social media and all that stuff. But I think that I welcome that, because it gives us so much more information. And I feel like you have to really be special to be great nowadays.
Did you ever see the movie A Beautiful Mind?
With Russell Crowe? I have not.
Okay. So there's this scene in there where he's at the chalkboard and he's working on this equation, and it's one of my favorite cinematic shots in like any movie, because all of a sudden, like, the characters that he's writing start coming off the board, and they're like floating around his head, and they're interacting, and they're doing all these things.
Sure.
That to me is the mind of a chef when he sits down or she sits down and reads a cookbook.
Right.
And you see something, it's like, ooh, well, if I apply that to this, and then I could do this with that, and then that with it, and then it just becomes this whole like immersive experience as you're sitting there, and then it's 3 hours later, and you're like, oh,
Right.
Oh, I've been taking 4 pages of notes.
Right.
What do you know?
It's definitely not. I mean, it's pretty similar, if I'm being honest with you, because we also are terrible at staying on one track.
Right.
So, to figure out if I believe the plot of the story is he turns out to be crazy, right?
To be perfectly honest, it's been so long since I've seen the movie. I don't know, but I'm also not going to ruin it for you if I did know. So you'll just have to watch it.
Right. I'll just have to watch it. But yeah, I mean, things flying around your head. There are so many chefs that you can talk to, or cooks or whatever that have so many cookbooks, but have only actually followed a recipe in any cookbook a dozen times, half a dozen times. And I'm one of them. I take these things.
Well, you're not a recipe person.
No.
Yeah.
I take these things and I use them as inspiration, and I try to figure out how to apply them, not just over the dish that I'm trying to configure now, but also for the future.
Yeah.
How could I take this? And again, it's, I mean, honestly, we all learn this. Every chef in the world really, really started to, we all talked about technique and la technique and all these things. We started really looking at that whenever Jacques Pepin became famous in America.
What a fun name to say.
He's
Jacques Pepin.
He is an American treasure.
Yeah.
But we really started focusing on that a lot more whenever he came on the scene, because he was all about the technicality side. But the people who exploded that was Ferran and Albert Adria at El Bulli, and they were the ones who were like, we're not coming up with recipes. We're coming up with techniques that can be applied to anything in the world. So we wanted to make this, a technique that will create a frozen sandwich that turns to smoke in your mouth. You know what I mean? It's like they can apply that to any liquid and just make it whatever it is. But they decided they wanted to go for a cocktail. And so you eat this thing that looks like a baguette sandwich, and it is frozen with liquid nitrogen, and it comes out of your nose, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is incredible.
Yeah.
They could do that with anything in the world. And so they were like, we are technique driven, and we can apply that across the board. And I feel like when that happened, so many people tried to figure out how to make a facsimile of that as much as possible. Mm-hmm. And then you have those people who do, a starch, a meat, a veg, a sauce, and then microgreens in the middle in a giant pile. Yeah. It's like, okay, that's completely fine. If that's the kind of food you want to make, that's entirely fine. And I'm sure it is delicious at some point. But the fun about getting to cook the way that we do is that we get to really overanalyze things, and we get to think about not just an ingredient in its form as it is, but what we can do to manipulate it and not necessarily make it look or seem like anything else, but how to use its biggest potential. Say, the creaminess of eggplant, the acidity, the savoriness at the same time of tomato, its gelling qualities, its, certain, lean meats versus things that take a long time to braise. Why do they take a long time to braise? And, can we get around that and cook that like a lean meat? So can we take a whole brisket and then take all the connective tissue out of it and cook that as though it were a steak on a grill? I mean, yeah, you can.
You could do that.
You certainly can.
Sounds delicious.
Yeah, it would be.
So we sprinted past the hour mark. I'm going to wrap up with this.
Yep.
Ooh, this is a tough question. I'm just going to prep you. This is one of those open. You don't need any more bourbon. You're good. It'll just delay the answer or expound on the answer or whatever. In your opinion, what type of cuisine or type of cooking is next for Tulsa as far as expanding our culinary palette as a city? Is there something that you think we don't have or we don't have enough of that will take us, maybe not to the next level, but just continually, take us towards being known as a culinary city?
I do, and I hope that it's kind of an open-ended question, obviously, but in my opinion, I hope the next thing for gastronomy in America, period, is looking past Southern comfort food as America's roots and finding the root of those ingredients where they truly came from. I was talking to Christina about this the other day.
Yeah, explain that for me.
We don't have especially like very few, if any. And if there are some, I would love to hear where they were coming from. But restaurants that are rooted in Africa. We always have these French restaurants, and everybody's very quick to latch on to European cuisine because the French are the pinnacle, right? Well, then the Danes and the English and the Spanish and the Italians and the Belgians and all these different people took what they wanted to from that cuisine because it became, the prominent flavors and the way that we should cook, because it focused the most on agriculture, and it focused the most on, revering a product versus just feeding someone. So I feel like that approach being applied in different areas is what has always been the next big thing. Obviously, we just had a Scandinavian restaurant open here in Tulsa,
which is delicious.
Good.
By the way. Yeah.
We need more delicious restaurants here.
100%.
And but with that being said, the thing that I feel like there's such a lack of, not just in Oklahoma, because generally speaking in Oklahoma, it's safe to say we're behind about 6 to 8 to sometimes 10 years on certain
That's
things.
Safe.
Which is unfortunate, but that's the speed that we're in.
I don't know if that'll always be the case. Maybe it will.
I don't think so. But my hope is the second and third generation of the people who came here, and they are working on they're basically following, I don't know if coattails is the right phrase, but basically their parents or grandparents had to work so hard to get here and make a success of themselves, or make their family feel successful in the situation they were able to create. And all that hard work is going to be the fuel that generations after them need to celebrate them as in a resounding way. And I hope that it's not just your restaurants that are already opened here. Like, we have a few great Indian places, and we have lots of great Mexican food, especially on the east side. We can sit there and talk about different nationalities, but I feel like the thing that we're lacking so much of is, if you think about Europe or Mexico, and then you think about the size of Africa, and the amount of different regional cuisines that could possibly be there, and the food that we don't get to taste because we're not cooking it here. They're not good. Like, no one is cooking it here.
Yeah.
It's
you're right. A good African restaurant, African cuisine in general.
It's something that I am so far removed from that I would love to see and learn more from. And it's just so hard because so many people that are here of African descent, it's hard to learn their lineage because of obviously, our awful past. But with that being said, I feel like the greatest things and the way that we can share our culture in the most immediate way is through cuisine. I would love to see more Native American chefs step into the spotlight as well, because of our region, obviously, me being Native American, but also wanting to learn more. We get to teach people every time we present a plate. We get to teach them either a bit of history or a bit of agriculture or, regionality or, seasonality, so many different things. I feel like you can really learn so much through a plate of food in the right context. And so when we're talking about those places that are, serving a starch and a meat and microgreens, it's like, is that a story? Is that a story on a plate?
No, it's food.
And that's, again, kind of goes back to the way that I get to cook right now. It's
sustenance
why I'm so
is what
excited.
that is. Yeah.
Right. It's a means to an end.
Right.
Which makes me so excited to get to go to work, is that, we get to promote all these people, and we get to tell a story on a plate that started from a person looking over a seed catalog in December of the year before, and they're planning their harvest and they're going through all this. But yeah, at the end of the day, I would love to see so much more from the giant expanse that is that continent. But I mean, I'm open for everything that's new.
Sure.
So anything that, getting a new lens on Mexican, even just,
man, America in general probably has what, an eighth of the depth of cuisine that Mexico has to offer.
I mean, yeah, yeah.
Because it's so different, right?
And
people think of Tex-Mex as Mexican food. It's like, no, bro.
Yeah, and I mean, like we talked about before, every food has its place. Every food, like, you know, those places are about getting butts and seats, and what
it is, and there's a place for that, and it's fine, and it's delicious.
Yeah,
right.
It can be great, and it can vary. I mean, it's convenient, and it's there, it's reliable. Yeah. But I mean, again, what we go back to is we're talking about experiences, and we're talking about sharing an experience with someone and offering a story. They don't necessarily have to want to hear. We're not trying to beat anybody over the head with our story, but if you want to hear it, we're definitely
we'll tell it. Yeah. No restaurant in Africa has ever won a Michelin star, right?
Michelin doesn't go to Africa. Michelin, they only go to certain cities. You can actually pay the Michelin guy.
What about a James Beard Award? Any chef in Africa?
Well, James Beard is
American
national.
Only. Okay.
So I'm sure
What I'm getting at is, are there any awards that go to any good restaurant in Africa? Like, I've never heard of one.
I mean, honestly, the 50 best, the San Pellegrino's 50 best, I believe there are a few restaurants in South Africa that a couple that have made the list. But I mean, when you're talking about a continent that size,
I know.
I
now,
can't
granted,
imagine.
there's probably not, in the majority of those countries in Africa, there's probably not higher end restaurants.
Maybe not.
Would be my guess, and I could be totally wrong.
Right.
I admit that. But you would think South Africa, and then, like, you know, the Egypt area, and like up there, you know, you probably find more. But
yeah, I mean, it's you know, there's definitely the difference in rural and urban communities. But I mean, there are huge cities that are that I feel like are going undiscovered, and I also think that, you know, we talk about us being years behind. Those lists are years behind.
Oh, 100%.
They're just now awarding things to Asian chefs and cooks that they should have been for decades, to South American and Central American chefs and cooks that they should have been doing for decades. Because, I mean, the Michelin guys started in France. And so it was very focused on that type of cuisine. If you were opening a French restaurant in the south of Spain, chances are they would probably go check it out. But if it wasn't, I mean, who's to say? Right. So you really have to, again, that whole you can't afford to not sell yourself anymore.
That's why.
Very true.
Yeah. Well, man, I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah.
Tell Lisa I said hello. When can people come eat at FarmBar? What's your schedule?
So we are open for reservations from Wednesday through Saturday. We have two seatings we have a seating on Wednesday and a seating on Thursday. Those begin at 6. Then we have two seatings each night on Friday and Saturday, one at 5:30 and one at 8:30. Those will all be inside the restaurant, and we have the bar seating as well. So if you like to watch people cook and hear us talk and not try to curse, you know, you're free to do that and kind of see a little bit more behind the scenes, ask questions as it's being presented to you, be served by the chef herself. And so, yeah.
Here's how to let Trey know you heard the podcast. Sit at the chef's table, bring like a bag of peanuts, and just throw them at him.
You don't have to do that.
Just occasionally.
You
just
don't.
One at a time. Like, who the fuck is throwing peanuts at me?
No, my name's on the menu. You can just say hi. I mean, seriously.
That works too. Tell Christina I said hello.
No.
Love you, bro. Thanks for coming on. See you next week on the Tasting Room. Take care.